Hi everybody, this is a My Bookish week, a little day late, but that's okay. I wanted to make an announcement in my intro. One of the books that I'm going to wrap up is of a political nature. If you don't want to listen to the reviews, if you don't want to listen to anything regarding Trump, if you don't want to have anything to do with it, and that's not why you come to these videos, that's okay. Blow right through that part of my video. I would appreciate it if you don't leave any negative comments and you do not hit the dislike button because I have warned you. Thank you very much. Hi Booktube, it's Kim at middle of the book march. This is a day late and $1 short in my Bookish week. Yesterday was Saturday and that's when I usually post my videos. I actually film them and post them typically on the same day. But it was a rough one. It was a busy one, so you get it on a Sunday this week. Let's see. I finished 3 books last week. Again, I finished them. I didn't read all of them in completion, but I did finish all 3 of them last week. One of them was an audiobook, and I listened to it back and forth going to work. I'm now going into work every day for reduced hours because my daughter is still doing remote school and still needs some at-home support here and there. So I am going in every day, which gives me quite a bit more time to listen to some audiobooks. And what I have found is I am getting more into audiobooks these days. What I found is nonfiction works much better for me via audiobook than fiction. I really like reading the book on paper for fiction. So the book that I picked, and as I said in my intro, this is a book of a political nature. Go fast forward through this initial wrap up. But I read Mary Trump's book, Too Much and Never Enough. And it's basically about how the Trump family created the world's most dangerous man. That's kind of the subtitle of the book. Now, I did not read it for the political aspect of it, even though Trump at the time was the president of the United States. I read it for the psychological aspects. This book was fascinating. Mary Trump is the author and she narrated the book, which gave it a lot more of a personal twist. Even though I have to say her voice is very calm and soothing, but there wasn't a lot of up pitch and variation in her voice. So it did sound a little monotone at times. However, I did appreciate that she was the one that narrated. She writes this book about the psychology of what made Donald Trump and what made him the man he is today and the type of man that he is. So she is the daughter of Trump's oldest brother. Trump is the 4th of 5 children, so he's the 2nd youngest. And his oldest brother and the firstborn child was Freddie Trump, named after their father, Fred Trump Sr. I was so fascinated by this book because it describes Donald Trump's childhood. It describes the family. It talks about how he was raised and what that did to affect his psyche and his temperament. Fred Trump Sr. and his wife Mary were, both of them, extremely cold, unattached parents. Fred Trump was only concerned with building an empire. He was only concerned with money and financial status. He had absolutely zero, and no exaggeration according to the book, zero interest in any of his 5 children for quite a while. He expected his oldest son, Fred Jr., to become just like him, so he tried to groom him into a capitalist. And Freddie, who they nicknamed Fred Jr., was just simply not that type of a man. He enjoyed flying and boating. He was much more emotional and sensitive, and his father deemed that a weakness. He tried to bring him into the family business, and Freddie balked at that. He ended up becoming a TWA pilot, commercial pilot in the 60s. That failed because he became an alcoholic. And so he left TWA to go back to work with Trump Sr., Fred Trump Sr. It's so hard to put this entire book into one short wrap-up, but the basic gist is their mother, Mary, had multiple health problems. She had 5 children, so some of them were gynecological. She had severe osteoporosis. She was hospitalized many times. She was sick at home for a very long time and bedridden. So there were people other than their parents that raised the 5 Trump children. Freddie was deemed a failure and was ostracized from the family. He was married and had 2 children, Mary and her brother Fritz, which they nicknamed. And they were basically ostracized from the rest of the family, so never enjoyed the wealth of the Trump family. They lived not in squalor, but they lived at a much lower level than the rest of the Trump kids. And so Mary and her brother basically lived a higher than normal average middle-class life, but they struggled a lot, and her parents eventually divorced. I'm going to try to fast forward this description. Donald was deemed to be much more like Fred Sr., and all 5 of the Trump children learned early on their worth and their value came from what they could give to Fred Sr. They learned very quickly they could not receive warmth or nurturing from either of their parents. Donald learned very quickly about the failures of his oldest brother, Freddie, according to their father. So he became very cutthroat, very concerned with money. He became a liar, a cheater, a bully, and basically he did not receive any parenting or any warmth or love from their parents. So he was the one that Fred Sr. groomed to take over the business. According to Mary Trump, Donald was never a self-made man. He received all of his money and advantages directly from his father. He went into business, into real estate with his father's company, and basically branched off from there. It's so hard to not want to go on with this description, but Fred Sr. was basically sociopathic and created this child in Donald to be narcissistic, verging on a line of sociopathy. Sociopathy? Which one is how you pronounce it? I think you know what I mean. But he created this child, Donald, to be almost just like him, but even more of a shark mentality. So Donald became much more financially successful than his father, Fred. However, that didn't last very long because Donald was all about debt and credit. And we know, basically, if we remember Donald's uprising in the public eye, in celebrity, we remember how he was, developed the Trump business in New York City, starred in the reality show, The Apprentice, and it goes on from there. But according to Mary Trump, who is a trained clinical psychologist, Donald doesn't have a core empathy for people. He's not intelligent. He never did well in school. He was sent away to a military school as a young boy because nobody could control him. His parents couldn't have him around. They didn't want to take the time to raise him. So that's how he developed into the person he is today. And again, I could keep going on and on and on. But what Mary Trump offers is an insider look into the family. And she's been described as someone who is probably disgruntled because she was basically cut out of Fred Sr.'s will and received nothing upon his death, even though his estate was worth several millions of dollars. It would be billions in today's currency. So people can say she was a disgruntled family member who didn't receive anything. But quite honestly, I think we all know enough about Donald Trump to realize what she was saying is the truth. And she doesn't offer too much that we can't have seen for ourselves in coverage of Donald Trump. But she does give the background glimpse as to why and how he became who he is. It's a fascinating book. There's nothing spectacular about the writing, but the content is so interesting. And it was a great read on audio, being able to listen to it in the car. The other 2 books I finished, let's move on from there. I finished The Black Flamingo by Dean Otta. This is billed as a young adult book in verse. Dean Otta is a young British black man who is a poet and an author. This is set in the UK. He is a young boy that grows up with a single mother. He is Greek and Jamaican. His father is absent from their lives. He comes out as a young teenager, and eventually, once he gets to college, joins a club to become a drag queen, and it's fascinating. It's heartwarming. The poetry is really sweet and emotional. The way he describes his journey through discovering his sexuality, discovering what he wants to do with performing in drag, it was really exceptionally done. I really enjoyed it. It's definitely geared towards a younger audience. So again, it's written in verse. It's an extremely fast read. I really enjoyed the poetry. However, it's not, without sounding too insulting, it's not spectacular in its writing. It's very good. It's very emotionally satisfying. The stories, the way he creates the story, the poetry that he includes, his experiences working in drag. And this is basically a fictionalized account of kind of his maybe autobiography, so autofiction possibly. But it's very good. It's great for young people, for young adults. I would say it's a decent book to offer to middle grade readers who may be a little bit more mature, because it offers such good examples of young people coming out, young people dealing with their sexuality in a public way, and the journey and the feelings surrounding that. And I love the parts that he describes about performing in drag. It was really cool. And the last book I finished last week is The Jewish Odyssey of George Eliot. This is my January pick for my George Eliot reading project read-along. This relates directly to the novel Daniel Deronda by George Eliot, which I finished late last year and absolutely adored. So it might be a little obscure for anybody who hasn't read Daniel Deronda, but this is basically the account of George Eliot's views towards Judaism, why and how she wrote the novel Daniel Deronda. It offers a little bit about George Eliot's background and biography, why she wanted to write about the Jewish nation, Zionism, Judaism, her journey from kind of an agnostic Christianity into how she felt about Jewish people and the Jewish life. It was fascinating. It's a very short read. This was written by Gertrude Himmelfarb, basically. I really enjoyed reading this background, and George Eliot was an intellectual woman in Victorian England in the mid-1800s. She lived with George Lewes for a few decades, unmarried. He was married and had children, but his wife also had extramarital affairs, so they all lived kind of openly. George and Marianne Evans, who George Eliot is her actual real name. So she has an interesting and a fascinating background. It talks about a lot of the philosophers and writers that she read on a consistent basis, the amount of study that she put into Hebrew, into the Jewish faith, the number of languages that she learned. She was a translator for many different languages, German, Hebrew, the amount of copious notes that she took for resources into Judaism. It's a fascinating book, very readable, short, but a look into basically the Jewish Odyssey of George Eliot. It talks in the beginning of the Jewish question, and that's basically the name of the first chapter. It's basically discussing Jewish citizenship, race versus religion, race combined with religion. It's a very interesting look into Eliot's background in the novel Daniel Deronda. So if anybody else is doing that read-along, let me know if you've taken a look at it. I'm going to post some comments on the Voxer group, so if any of you are watching right now, I'll post some thoughts there as well. A little more complete thoughts that I can develop. Now, what am I currently reading? I am currently reading 3 books. I'm reading The Address Book by Deirdre Mask. Actually reading 4 books. This is a buddy read with Heidi from My Reading Life and Noel from the book Rook, who is an Instagrammer and a commenter. This is so interesting. We're halfway through. We're going to finish this on Friday. Those are my tabs. This is so fascinating. It's discussing street addresses and how the systems came up to address people, to number and name street names, the advantages of that. It talks about different cities around the world and what their system is and why and how they developed. What are the advantages and the disadvantages to people having addresses? So this sounds like I'm wrapping it up, but I'm not. I'm only halfway done. So we're going to complete it this week, and then next weekend I'll have a full wrap up. Really interesting stuff. These Truths by Jill Lepore. Our current section for the third quarter of our read-along is part 3, which is the state, 1866 to 1945. It's a big span of years. So we're reading that section. And for my other read-along, I am still reading Thomas Cromwell, A Revolutionary Life by Darmid McCulloch. And this is going to go through March. So it's a big one, a couple hundred pages for each of those months for January, February, and March. For anybody in the Cromwell group, I will be posting some thoughts in the Voxer group probably by the end of next week before my wrap-up. Won't be clearly wrapping up this whole book, just the first third. So if you're still interested in reading along, I'll be starting Wolf Hall in April, but reading this biography as a background. So that's it for last week. Oh, and one more. My new audiobook that I'm listening to in the car is Ruth Bader Ginsburg's My Own Words, and she narrates the introduction or the preface, and the book is narrated by Linda Lavin, who, I don't know if any of you remember the show Alice, I think from the 70s. Linda Lavin is an actress. I believe she's a Broadway actress and voice actor. So I'm still in the intro preface listening to Ruth Bader Ginsburg's voice. And it's very touching to listen to her narrate her own background, and really looking forward to getting into learning more about her life. So that's it. Yeah, that's it. It's Sunday here. It's really sunny in New Hampshire. I think it's pretty cold. I haven't even opened the door yet. We're getting ready to go out. So let me know in the comments below what you think of any of the books. Let me know if you have any questions, whatever. Let me know what you're reading. I hope you're reading something good. And I will see you all in the next video. Thanks for watching, everybody. Bye.